In the meantime, we are following the situation with the president's COVID. Of course, a lot of people are saying if the president of the United States can get this, then who else is next? Pretty much it's easier these days to find someone who has not had COVID than someone who has. Dr. Anthony Fauci joins us right now, the White House Chief Medical Advisor. Doctor, very good seeing you. The president's situation and what you're learning of it, a lot of what we're getting, Doctor, is coming from secondhand from the president's physician and relayed to his top medical authorities. That was not the case when President Trump was diagnosed. Is there a difference? Should we be hearing more from his personal physician?
Well, we're hearing, I think, more than one daily pronouncement about what exactly is going on. So it's a written statement and then a statement that's given through Dr. Jha. And then I speak to Dr. Kevin O'Connor twice a day. I spoke to him as recently as last night at 10 o'clock, and we went over the case carefully. And as he has been saying, the president is doing really quite well. He continues to improve. And I think that's another example of what we've all been saying of what it means of when you have the interventions like vaccination, doubly boosted, and being on an antiviral drug that has a proven track record of being very effective in preventing the progression to severe disease leading to hospitalization.
You're talking about Paxlovid?
The president, yeah. Yes, I'm talking about Paxlovid, Neil. He's on Paxlovid. This is his second day now on Paxlovid. He's tolerating it well, and he continues to improve. I mean, he was better today than he was last night, and better yesterday than he was when he first got the symptomatology.
When you did talk to the president's physician, obviously you both have to consider the age of the president and whether, you know, his getting back to a routine, or at least one from a distance, is wise. What do you think?
Well, he is feeling well enough that he is fulfilling the duties from a virtual standpoint. Neil, you and I spoke about when I got infected. You know, I'm a little bit older than the president. I had symptomatology very similar to what the president had. I was on Paxlovid. So there's a lot of similarities there. And I did exactly the same as the president was doing, and I wasn't any worse for the wear. I did my work virtually the way the president is doing. So he's following a course of a person who's otherwise quite healthy, who did the right thing, got vaccinated, doubly boosted, did the right thing, went on Paxlovid, and is doing well. So I think there's nothing wrong with what he's doing by trying to get work done from a virtual standpoint.
You know, Doctor, in the meantime, we're learning that the White House is looking at holding off further booster shots for those under the age of 50, I believe under the age of 50, until, you know, we can get to the fall when such booster shots will be able to handle these variants and subvariants. Do you agree with that?
Well, Neil, I think that's a bit of a misinterpretation of that, because I've been asked that on several interviews. So I called up Dr. Peter Marks, who's the person responsible for that at the FDA, and he assured me that no definitive final decision has been made about that, and it is still under active consideration. But somehow a report came out that a final decision was made about giving people less than 50 boosters now as opposed to waiting. That's still under active consideration.
But if the booster shots now, Doctor, I think the genesis of this is if present booster shots do not reflect or deal with these variants of BA5, what have you, that it might be wiser to wait a little bit when such booster shots will be able to address that. What do you think?
Well, Neil, it's a judgment call. If you have someone who's less than 50 years old and they are in a risk category, having an underlying disease, immune compromised, or even without being immune compromised, has a disease that might lead to a severe outcome, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, severe diabetes, I would not wait for any other booster in the fall if that person was due for a booster. So I think we've got to be careful. You go by the CDC guidelines, but you also have to use clinical judgment.
You know, Doctor, I had a chance this week to talk to the Novavax CEO debuting a vaccine of its own. I believe the fourth now with the existing others. There are about 20% of the American people who have yet to be vaccinated at all. But I raised with the Novavax CEO the same issue I want to raise with you right now. That 20%, looking at your close call with this, you came out of it flying colors. That's great. And now hearing the President of the United States got this, fully vaccinated, double boosted, all of that, as did I, by the way. You notice how I put myself in your company. But they say, well, gosh, if these guys are getting it and doing all the right things, then why the heck should I bother? What do you tell them?
Oh, Neil, I'm so glad you brought that up because there is some misunderstanding about that. The vaccines do a very good job of protecting you from advancing to severe disease leading to hospitalizations and deaths. When you have a very highly transmissible virus like the BA5, which we're dealing with right now, which is the overwhelming majority of isolates that are in this country and circulating, you may get infected. Vaccines do protect you against infection somewhat, but it's so transmissible that people are getting infected who have been vaccinated. But if you look at the difference, Neil, between people who get seriously ill, hospitalized, and death, and compare the unvaccinated people with the people who are vaccinated and boosted, the data just spring out at you as being so obvious for the very, very strong advantage from the standpoint of severe illness of getting vaccinated. There's no question about that. So the argument of saying that, well, Fauci or the president or Neil Cavuto got vaccinated and boosted and they still got infected, so why should I get vaccinated? That is really a very, very profound misinterpretation of what the real purpose of the vaccine is to keep you from getting seriously ill.
Well, I'm glad you kept me in that trio, Doctor. Let me step back and get your sense of where all this fits into the heat wave we have going on in this country and throughout much of the world. Now, I know there's some trepidation ahead of the fall and cooler weather and a likely spike in cases from some in the medical community. But, of course, these are very tough conditions for anyone, whether you're sensitive to the heat or not. In this environment, do COVID cases rise? They have been rising. They've spiked mightily across Europe. There are a smattering of such spikes in key regions in China still. I'm wondering how a heat wave complicates that.
Well, the only way that I would imagine, first of all, we've experienced now, Neil, and you and I have spoken about that this virus spreads in the summer, it spreads in the winter, it just keeps spreading because of the high degree of transmissibility. The only thing I could think of as the most obvious relationship and connection with the heat wave is that it drives more people indoors with air conditioning. And when you do that, and you don't have proper ventilation, and you have a recirculation of the air, that could be the same sort of risk you put yourself under, as opposed to when you're in the winter and you go indoors because it's cold outside. So anything that would drive you in a closed indoor space that has air conditioning or what have you, that very well could lead to poor ventilation flow. And then again, when that happens, that's always a risk for the transmission and acquisition of a respiratory illness.
Very quickly, Doctor, we have these spikes in cases, as you know, and some are revisiting the CDC with recommendations for people to put masks back on. In New Jersey, a recommendation for all 18 counties there. New York Governor Hochul is considering the same, but not going beyond a recommendation. Where do you stand on that? Do you personally view masks as a good idea in this environment or a bad one?
Oh, it's a very good idea, Neil. I know there's this sort of pushback when you talk about mandate, but put mandate aside and look at what's good common sense recommendation to keep yourself safe from being infected or from transmitting infection. The data that well-fitted masks like the KN95 and the N95, those masks are very effective, and there's a lot of studies that show that.
All right, we'll watch it closely. Dr. Fauci, very good seeing you again. Feel well?
Thank you very much, Neil. Always good to be with you.
Same here. Dr. Anthony Fauci.